on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
The examination syllabus includes very tight statements of what the students will be tested on. You might have to explain nuclear power stations, and you've got 500 words. Go. And so it really trains you to use your words wisely. Brevity is next to godliness in that kind of thing.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers. No more barriers. No one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Show. It's a Friday. It's 5 o'clock. It's Crackerjack, I was going to say, which takes us back to our childhood. Mark Dawson. I'm James Blatch. Crackerjack. You have to say Crackerjack when someone says Crackerjack.
Sorry, American listeners and Australian listeners and listeners apart from anyone in the UK. Yes.
Over the age of 45,
yes.
Probably. Yes, childhood memories. There you go. Welcome to the Self-Publishing Show. Really good interview. Inventive, creative project, self-publishing project to talk about today with Hudson coming up in a few minutes. Before then, I have a nice task, Mark. We give away to our Gold Patreon supporters get an opportunity to win the Ads for Authors course worth $900 once a year, and we have pulled a name out of the bag. Actually, Catherine has pulled the name out of the bag, and it is Clive Weatherhead. So, Clive, you have got an enrollment in Ads for Authors. You'll hear from us, or you will have heard from us by the time this podcast goes out. We've got another one of those coming up because we have the 101 course opening in March, and we will do the 101 draw just before then, so you know whether it's you or not. And if you want to be in that draw, you need to go to patreon.com/self-publishing show. Although I think there is a qualification period for that particular draw, but check the T's and C's when you get to patreon.com/self-publishing show. We also have a course to talk about, Mark, do we not? A mini course, a shorts course, if you like.
We do, yes. We did one on Scrivener, which is so we got Gwen Hernandez, who wrote Scrivener for Dummies, and she put together a really good course, and it's done very well. I think we've had over 300 authors sign up for it. It's quite cheap, less than $20, like a cent. I think $19.99,
yes,
isn't it? So
it's just under less than $20,
just under $20. But it's plenty value there. It goes through everything you need to know about using Scrivener. One thing worth noting is she does use the Mac version. So we had quite a few people saying, "Will this work with the PC version?" The two versions are reasonably similar, but not identical. So you need to bear that in mind. Best policy on that is to, if you want to, is just
get a Mac.
Get it. Well, yeah, get a Mac. Or you can also get the course, have a quick look, go through it for a day or two. And if you don't think that it's close enough for you, then just ask us and we'll refund the course fee. So you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, and Gwen is, as we speak, she is updating the format section in the 101 course. The Scrivener Shorts course is really about using Scrivener for writing books, which is his main thing. And I personally wouldn't use Scrivener for formatting, but I know lots of people do. I prefer Vellum, and she's updating that formatting option.
We had one funny email. We get lots of funny emails, but I got one funny one suggesting in the email I sent out announcing this course that it was Gwen shouldn't have called her book Scrivener for Dummies because Dummies was offensive. Oh. And I think it was just a misunderstanding, but I wrote back to the correspondent and said Dummies is a quite well-known brand by this stage, and kind of directed him or her to the Dummies page, and I think the sting of any potential offence was removed by that. But I thought Dummies was, everyone knew about Dummies. It was a really big brand, but perhaps not everyone does.
No. And I don't really know how it could be offensive. I understand there are some words that we don't use anymore that has sort of people's medical conditions, but dummies is like you call yourself a dummy call yourself a dummy for getting something wrong, or
it's self-deprecating. So obviously we're very good at it because we're English. We self-deprecate all the time, which is kind of what we're doing right now.
Well, I'm terrible at self-deprecating.
Yeah, very good. Well done. But yeah, I don't know whether it kind of translates everywhere. But anyway, that one was one of my favourite emails of the last week. And we ended up as good friends. So I was very polite when I replied, which isn't always the case.
And as you say, the For Dummies brand, that yellow and black book, which I'm sure is obviously it's big in the States, it's big over here. If you get to commission to write one of those and it's on a good subject, that's a good trad deal probably to have. And actually not dissimilar, Mark, from our interviewee today, who has a similar sort of deal, but he writes textbooks for children about to take their exams, what I guess is the high school diploma level, GCSE in the UK. So he writes I think it's physics, it's in the interview anyway. He writes those books and they have a sort of pretty much guaranteed level of selling every year, which is rather nice for him to have that income. But he's been creative on top of that. I think this caught your eye, did it not, when he first sort of came to our attention?
I was just going to say that was the smoothest segue you've ever done. Basically, segues for dummies with written by James Platch. His email. I saw the email. I see. Well, most of the emails, we all have a triage system because we get quite a lot of emails, and I did see this one, and I think I may have sent it to young Tom and said, I think we should look into this because it's quite interesting what he's done beyond just the publishing of books. He's been quite clever with some of the associated material that he's made available, and it could be something that I could easily use in when we launch the After School Detective Club books properly in shops next year. That kind of thing I think could work quite well. So an interesting interview. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm looking forward to listening myself.
Yeah, and I think he's chosen the right time this year as well. Lots of people at home and looking for things, creative presents for their children. It doesn't involve leaving the house. So let's hear from... Yes, indeed. Let's hear from Miles.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Miles Hudson, welcome to the Self-Publishing Show. Lovely to have you on here from our fair Blighty from England, just up the road. Well,
yes, indeed. So I'm in Durham in the north of England.
Just up the road, a mere 4.5 hours driving from me. But,
something like that, yeah.
It's nowhere, in America, people are going, that is up the road. But yes, well, they all speak differently up there. But you don't actually have a strong Durham accent. Are you from somewhere else?
No, I grew up near London, went to university in Durham some years ago and stayed ever since. I love it up here. So fell in love with the Northeast and made it my home.
It's a beautiful part of the world up there, although it can be chilly.
It's always 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 degrees colder than the southern temperatures on the weather forecast. But the good thing about that, I mean, we're right east. It's probably only 10 miles to the North Sea from here. And being on that side of the Pennines means we don't actually get much rain.
Oh, okay.
So it's clear and cold is a sort of general pattern for the weather in Durham.
Good. Okay. Well, look, Miles, we've got you on here. You've been a bit of a serial entrepreneur, creative force in this area. You've traditionally published, you've self-published, you've crowd fundraised, and quite an interesting idea I was having a look at before we came on line about sending these postcards from space to engage children in a topic I love, of course, which is space. So we'll get on to all of those things, but I think probably you're going to be better explaining your situation than I am. So give us a little potted history of your experience, Miles.
Okay, so my original career was school physics teacher. And over the years, I got approached by a massive publishing company to write bits and pieces of stuff for them. Really, it started off just as little extra bits like photocopyable worksheets or in actual fact, I've been doing it for so long, they approached me to write some content for their first website pages for kids.
Their first website? So that's,
yes, indeed.
So 1995?
No, I was a little bit after that. 1999 was the when I first started with them. But anyway, that sort of slowly, as you do more and more for them and they learn that you're sort of reliable and produce good quality stuff, you slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger contracts until it was probably 12 or 13 years ago now that I got my first solo contract for an A-level book. And so I've written 3 sets of that, 3 sort of incarnations as the syllabus has changed over the years. But essentially, so I am Edxcel A-level physics.
Wow.
And actually just recently, they've started doing international version of that as well.
Okay.
And so my sales have now gone through the roof because China's on board with that.
Wow.
And so where I thought I was doing quite well with the domestic stuff, China's just overtaken it like you wouldn't believe.
Obviously, a massive population there, isn't it? What's that experience like, writing a textbook? First of all, just from the writing point of view, curriculums are prescriptive. You can't. There's not much area for creativity in there, is there?
No, I mean, that's sort of good and bad. I mean, it means that I don't have to invent what's going in the book. I'll get a sheet of paper that tells me, right, you need to write on all these topics. And I mean, to the extent that the examination syllabus includes sort of very tight statements of what the students will be tested on. So there is a very sort of set order for the whole thing. And with a big textbook publisher like that, they also organise the sort of template structure of the pages. It's always a series of books, so because there's biology and chemistry and geology and psychology and stuff, and they always publish them in the same series. So the format is identical, which again means that's dictated to me. So that's kind of constrictive. Especially, as we'll talk about later, that I'm a very creative, kind of love fiction writing and so on. But the real discipline from it comes in that you get a very small word count. So a double page in one of those books where you have to explain it, you might have to explain nuclear power stations, and you've got 500 words. Go. And it's like, well, there's no way I could do it in only 500 words. And so it really trains you to use your words wisely. Brevity is next to godliness in that kind of thing.
And what about the editing process? Whereas at the company, is there like a quality assurance it goes through? Because the last thing they'd want is an error in a book like that, which potentially could impact someone's exams.
Well, the last thing I'd want is that, of course, because it's my reputation on the line as well. But the answer to your question is yes. I mean, they're very well established with sort of full calendared workflow systems. So there's several different editors. They also send it out to customers, essentially. So reviewers who are physics teachers will look at it and send in their reports. Then there's a guy who checks it for safety, that I haven't suggested you do anything that might hurt yourself.
Get some sodium chloride, have a small sip, and some sulfuric acid. Make sure
there's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and I mean it's really they're such a big, well-oiled machine that they have somebody doing all sorts. It amused me, really, but I would write questions, Billy was a school bully and threw so-and-so's bag on the roof, and, calculate how much energy it gets up on the roof, all this kind of stuff. And when I got the published book, this was quite an early one, I looked and I thought, okay, so that's the same question, but they've changed Billy's name. And of course, they've got a diversity officer whose job is to go through and alter so that there's a sort of fair representation of, gender and ethnicity and all sorts, which was obviously is a good thing. But to answer your question, it's to the nth degree that it's kind of controlled, and that can be really frustrating at times because there's so many links in the chain. And I like to think I'm never the weakest link, but it does mean, like you say, that errors come in. So I mean, I've had the situation where I've had proofs to check. I've checked the proofs. I've highlighted some problems, and either they've actually still been published, which is nightmare. But there was one case where, from the proofs, new errors had been introduced.
Yeah.
So the actual published thing was worse. Now, so I mean, it's minimal, but I would suggest there is no school textbook out there with zero errors.
Yes, of course. I mean, sure, that's the same for everything.
I mean, I guess that's true. There's always a typo, isn't there?
Yeah. And for people thinking about this sort of work, how does it work from a kind of IP point of view? So Edxcel are an exam board, I believe, right, in the UK?
Yeah, so the trick with Edxcel is they are owned by Pearson. So there's a real arm's length thing there where I'm not allowed to talk to anyone from Edxcel. It's an arm's length separate company, but because they own them, they recommend that Pearson is a good book to do if you're studying that. So that's why it's printed on the front of it.
But is there there's anything stopping me writing a physics book based on the Edxcel curriculum?
No, not at all. There might be the occasional restriction if you try to use genuine exam questions as examples. Okay. But apart from that, physics is physics. You're writing a book about physics, and by chance you're putting it all in the same order as their exam syllabus. So there isn't anything like that. But the crucial element there is that endorsement. So the fact that it's endorsed by the exam board makes a lot more sales. Yes, essentially.
And if you're going to be sitting that exam, you're going to buy that book, aren't you? You're not going to buy the book made up by me. Yeah. About, because the Earth's flat, right, as far as we know. So, that's where. Well,
you have a chapter on that in your book. Yeah. And I'll be happy to compete with you.
I am not a flat earther, just to make that little joke there. Okay, great. Well, that's a really interesting introduction to publishing, isn't it? Kind of very tight framework that you're operating within.
Yeah, I mean, the real beauty of that was it taught me the profession. It taught me
the process,
all the steps that are required, and the fact that, never miss a deadline and that kind of thing. And so it gave me a real strong insight into where the pitfalls might be when I'm doing my own books, when I'm sort of coming up with the ideas and writing fiction and in the most recent set of novels, actually publishing them myself. So yeah, it was really powerful in that regard. And the other sort of beauty of it, I suppose, is because I managed to get more and more work in the textbook field, I managed to reduce how much school teaching I did. So it's about 5 years ago now, I went fully freelance. So I stopped working in schools because there was enough money coming in from textbooks to allow me financially to do that. But the thing about textbook writing is it's very, very intense for a 6-month period. And then you're fallow for 6 months, 18 months. It depends on how quickly they change the syllabuses, how often they need a new book. But of course, that for me then is free time to write.
Yeah.
So I haven't yet managed to make fiction profitable, but it's what I spend most of my time doing, which is kind of a good situation to be in, although I'd like it to be profitable,
And the contracts, the royalties on writing those textbooks, are they more generous than fiction writers would be offered, or are they similar, equivalent?
So industry standard in textbooks is 10% across all authors. So usually it's a team. They prefer a team of authors. So you're then sharing that 10% depending on how much you write. Because there are so few physics teachers in the world, they struggle to find physics authors. So it's quite unusual that I've managed to be a solo author on so many books. But the advances and so on, I think, are quite generous, actually. I don't actually know. I've never had a fiction contract with a traditional publisher, so I don't know how to compare or how it does compare.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Well done. Are you still doing those? That's still your thing?
Yeah, like I say, there's so few people who could write physics textbooks. I have to turn work away. So I just sort of, it took a while for them to try and organize it, but during lockdown, when the postcards really took off, I actually then had to go back to somebody who was trying to recruit me to do a new piece of work and say, look, sorry, I can give you 3 days a month, but that's all. And in the end, she said, well, we won't get it done in time. But at the beginning of lockdown, the first lockdown, I wrote the teacher's guide for the new Egyptian science curriculum in physics for a couple of the year groups. So yeah, it's still ongoing.
And lockdown has its own, potentially opportunities. There's a guy called Joe Wicks. If you're in the UK, you'll know who Joe Wicks is. He's a school teacher. I think he was a school teacher, but he basically does a YouTube Get Fit thing in the mornings, and it's been a huge hit with the younger children to get some wake them up.
Books
and spin-off books and
hotcakes, aren't they?
I'm just wondering whether there's scope for you doing, your physics lessons on YouTube. And I've got a son, by the way, who's 14 and doing physics GCSE next year. So if you could do every Wednesday mornings, that would be great. Because we've just gone into lockdown again, of course.
Yeah. So that's not really my thing. There are quite a lot of people who do that stuff online. And so But I'll talk about it probably in more detail later. But this postcards idea, I'm hoping, will be something that parents will latch onto as useful for remote learning as well. So I'm going to say no at this stage, James, but I'm going to sort of push you into a slightly different scenario.
That's fine. I mean, they get to that point, don't they, when they're at primary school and you can help them with their homework. And there comes a point, honestly, it's actually about year 6 in primary school, they're last when they're about 10 or 11, when I start to struggle with the maths, and because it's been a long time. And their physics now, I look at his physics, it's great. He loves it, it's good. But I think also the language changes from, they don't use potential energy and words that we probably used back in the day. And so I can't really help him.
I mean, it's important to keep up to date with it. I said that I left the classroom 5 years ago. So writing physics textbooks, obviously, you do need to keep up to date. And in fact, I've now moved into training student teachers in physics, and so that gives me an opportunity to keep up to date with training teachers. But I mean, more than just the school-based stuff, physics is developing.
Yes.
There's several bits and pieces in those books that have been discovered since I left university. So I have to keep on top of all of that myself.
Well, I can remember the age of the universe when I was at school. The age of the universe was somewhere between 8 and 40 billion years, and they didn't really know. And now I think we're settled on 13.8 billion, and it's pretty widely accepted as being a
13.82 is the most recently published thing, there was a paper about 2 or 3 years ago. And that was from data of 10,000 galaxies they were measuring. So it's fairly tight. They think it's pretty accurate.
So that's one example, isn't it, of things changing in the textbook from...
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've had to change my PowerPoint presentations about the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe to reflect that change in the age.
Right. Of course, I was at school 13.8 billion years ago, so that's those early days of the universe.
So you can talk about it from personal experience.
I love cosmic soup for lunch, but anyway, right. Let's move on then to the fiction side. Then we're going to move on to the postcards I'm excited about talking about, which are perhaps more closely linked. So the fiction side, you obviously got a bug about the writing, the publishing services, and you've got a creative mind, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love words and ideas and so on, and so that creative element is really exciting for me. I much more enjoy writing fiction than writing physics textbooks, which, I mean, that's perhaps a truism anyway. But so as I've had those kind of fallow periods between textbooks, I've had an opportunity within the last few years to actually put that fiction writing to sort of full use, to actually write several novels. So I've kind of got 2 series. There's a dystopian future series. The first one of those was 2089. That was the Unbound crowdfunded one. And then I've self-published a series of detective stories based in Durham called, well, these are the first 2, Cricket Scorps and the Kidney Killer. It's interesting, actually, when people read several of them, they can identify the order that they were written in, because they say, your writing's improved over the years. And so it's very clear that the latest one is much better than the previous ones.
I'm getting around that by rewriting the same book over and over again before I publish it, so I get my word count up. Anyway, more about you, less about me. The crowdfunding thing, the Unbound, just explain to me what that was, what you meant by that.
Well, so if any of your audience aren't familiar with Unbound, they're a London-based publisher, just regular publishing house. So the trick is that you have to crowdfund the capital expenditure, the sort of upfront costs, like paying for editors, proofreaders, cover designers. All of that is so that the publisher isn't actually taking a big financial risk, which means that they can publish slightly more books than a regular publisher would. I mean, they don't publish everything that's submitted to them, but they do publish more than most, and that means that they can publish slightly more what you might call market risky sort of titles. So I mean, my dystopian future novel, I've had rejections from numerous agents and publishers previously, but So there's an element where there's less risk for them, and so more opportunity for people to get published that way. The downside, of course, is that you have to do the crowdfunding, which I hated. It's when I've got the book in my hand, I'm standing in Smith's talking to somebody, I do find it reasonably straightforward to sell to close a sale. I mean, I don't consider myself a salesman. I hate it, but I'm kind of gregarious enough, I suppose I can do it. But the crowdfunding thing, you're not even got something to show them. You're saying, could you pay a bit over the odds, in fact, for a book that might appear in 18 months' time? And so there's a big element of it where you're asking people really to support the arts rather than just to buy a book they want to read.
And what's the reward like for you from Unbound? Bearing in mind they're not taking on the risks and the upfront costs. What's the sort of return like?
Well, so the contract is a 50-50 profit share.
Okay.
But actually, when you drill down into that, it's 50-50 profit share. Whereas when I mentioned earlier about the textbooks is 10%, that's 10% of money coming in. Yeah. So it's, in the end, there's actually not a huge amount of difference in that. But, they're very open and honest and they're a great publishing house. I love Unbound. I just didn't like crowdfunding. Yeah. So the other side of your question, though, is about the marketing element of it. And if you're not, if you're on the sort of lower end, so the novel paperback kind of thing is relatively small, unimportant end of what Unbound deals in. You don't get much marketing support from them. And so it's basically down to me as much as it is when I'm self-publishing, pretty much, which is kind of, I guess, another reason why, I haven't retired to my yacht in the Caribbean on the strength of 2089.
So what do they get the book into bookshops? And I mean, what do they do?
Well, it's listed, but they don't actually, so like I say, there's different segments of what they publish. So I'm on what's known as the digital list. They're trying to sell the ebook versions more than anything else. So it is available as a paperback, but they don't push it. They don't have salespeople hassling Waterstones to take my book across the country. But they do sell, they have hardback books and stuff for different genres and marketplaces and that sort of things, and those might get more of a sales push, if you like.
And although you've crowdfunded the cost of editing, cover design, and so on, they organise all of that. So you just pass the money to them.
Now the beauty of that, I guess, for me personally at least, is I've now written the sequel to 2089, but I'm going to self-publish it, and because I had to have personal contact with the editors and proofreaders and cover designer for the last one, I just approached them directly and said, look, we did this before. Are you okay to do another job for me independently of Unbound? And they all said they were happy to do that. And so, we negotiated the fee for that. And essentially by project managing it myself, that was then cheaper. Now, of course, it meant I have to have the money up front to do that. But it still works out cheaper.
Well, so how long ago was the Unbound edition published, and how long ago the sequel that you self-published?
Okay, so 2089 was the original, the first in the series, which was the Unbound one. That came out in September 2018. And The Mind's Eye is the sequel, which I'm publishing on the 4th of February 2021.
Okay, so it's not published yet. I was going to say it'd be very interesting to see the financial returns based on self-publishing versus that Unbound model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an element where you're not comparing like with like, because, in the 2 years since, I've learned a huge amount about marketing my own books. So I'll be doing a better job of it than I was able to do 2.5 years ago. But then also, you're right. There is an element where you can just compare the sort of outgoings and income to a certain extent.
There's a bottom line, isn't there? You're going to be keeping 100% of the profits, but it's still profits rather than revenue. That's a key thing.
So I've still got to sell a load of books.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay, all right. So that's your self-publishing, and the dystopian, is this... so physics goes into that a little bit, or is it not related at all?
I'm very, very conscious not to sort of over-tech the story, But there is just by the nature of who I am, I can't get away from thinking about tech stuff. So the dystopian future has a surveillance system which is, remotely kind of wiretaps your brain, if you like, but it is remote. So your phone and the phone towers are, it's like a 5G conspiracy
the 5G
theory,
conspiracy,
really.
Yeah. The flat earthers are back.
So I've actually kind of developed what is a sort of logical and coherent science behind that. It's just one we haven't actually completely realized yet. And I mean, some of the scary thing is that as I'm going through the process of writing it, I might do some research or read something, and I suddenly discover, lo and behold, Nottingham University are investigating exactly what I'm writing about. So they actually have a thing for doing brain scans on children, which is you just put a bicycle helmet on, and there's magnetic sensors inside it which can detect inside the head. So without any kind of invasive procedure. And so, which is not quite what I've come up with, but essentially the same sort of idea. The fundamental basis is there. So
that sounds like the sort of thing that's easily going to get funded, probably by the military and other people.
It's probably they can probably already do it.
I always remember
that's your 5G conspiracy theory coming back at you. Yeah,
I always remember speaking to a group at a university in the UK, and 4 of them PhDs all looking for funding, and one of them was working on theoretical invisibility, got massively funded straight away by the military, and the other 3 were doing much more sort of academic stuff and got no money. So yeah, if you've got something
much more likely to actually happen though, the other 3.
Yes, almost certainly. Well, I don't know. I can't see her anymore, so maybe yes, we wouldn't know though, would we, if that's happened? So, okay, great. Well, good luck with your February book. So we're into 2021 now. You're you're on the runway for launching. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, I mean everything's ready. It's just a case of actually sort of producing the book now. Yeah, putting it up on KDP, and I'm looking into. I watched the edition of the self-publishing show you had with the American guy who's outsourced printing of books to China in a collective.
Yes, Matt was it, yeah.
So on the on the inspiration of that, I've been investigating what it's like to do a print run myself rather than just printing on demand through KDP. And so as long as I can, again, it's about upfront capital investment, but as long as I can finance it and then find space in my small flat to store all these books, it is a lot cheaper to do it that way.
Jason Miletsky, and that was last the episode 259, if people are interested in that, and I'm sure Jason will probably help you out with that. Okay, so let's move on to the final piece of the marketing empire that is Miles, is Postcards from Space. And I can see this, if you're watching on YouTube, there's one behind you. So just tell us about this idea.
So, well, again, this was a sort of the fruit of my lockdown cabin fever, I suppose. I'm a big traveller, and one of the things that I often do when I'm in other parts of the world is send postcards still, because it's so rare these days that we actually get any mail. And so people really like receiving it. So one of the things I did in lockdown was I kept in touch with a lot of friends and family by sending them postcards. Now about, I can't remember, 2 or 3, maybe 5 years ago now, I'd come up with this idea for a story. So an epistolary story written as in the form of letters, but the sort of USP of this book was going to be that you'd actually receive each chapter as the real letter in the post. And that idea, I thought, it was brilliant when I had this light bulb idea. But the trouble with that was, of course, I'd have to write a novel. And so at that point, that got shelved as a great idea. So whilst I was in lockdown and sending friends and family these postcards, it came back to me. And I thought, actually, maybe there is something in this in postcard form of, the sort of beautiful images you can get from NASA these days are so rich and intense, and everybody loves space. Then I came up with this idea basically of sending. So it's aimed at ages sort of 8 to 12, and each week your kid will get in the post a postcard with a beautiful picture. So again, like you say, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see there's one of Venus there. And then on the other side, the writing side of it is written as if it's been sent to you by a sort of junior colleague. So it's a junior astronaut and their space dog. And the two of them have these adventures on the different planets and send you stories about what's going on. And so the idea is it kind of is aimed at combining space science, because I'm a physics teacher, with a bit of fun, sort of adventures, trying to keep the stories exciting and engaging. And then there's a sort of overarching narrative in that there's a series of 12 postcards from all different places around the solar system. And so you follow their adventure as they go from one place to the next. They're actually searching for a missing rocket, and so they have to keep chasing to the next place, and they never end up finding it.
Spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, I don't know how your demographic for this show goes, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed we haven't got too many 8 to 12-year-olds that will suffer from that spoiler. But of course, what the beauty of that is, you see, it leaves me open for the next series.
Exoplanets.
Deep space.
Yes.
Yeah, well, exoplanets do feature. Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. That's a great idea. So how did you went about, I mean, the printing, I guess, is relatively simple compared to getting books printed and distributed.
Absolutely. So the hard part, I suppose, was making sure I had a quality product. So occasionally some of the photographs aren't actually as easy as it might seem to source. One of the beauties is that the big scientific organizations like NASA and the European Space Agency and so on, they give away all of their photographs for free. So you're allowed to use them even for commercial products, as long as you credit whichever mission it was that took the pictures, but you don't have to pay for using the pictures. So that's a real bonus, and kind of one of the reasons I started with space, actually. So that was the first thing, was to source good pictures. Neptune was a real struggle because it's only been visited by one spaceship ever. And that was launched in the 70s. So if you imagine the quality of the camera on it, we had to do a little bit of...
Was that one of the Voyagers?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but we had to do a little bit of jiggery pokery with Photoshop to make it sort of look rich and beautiful. And actually, it came out a lot nicer than I was anticipating. So I'm quite pleased with that. But then on the text side, I wanted, like I say, I had all those elements: fun, adventure, some scientific instruction for the students, but I didn't want it to just sound like a school book. And so the actual creative process of putting those 12 stories together was the thing that took the most time. And then I consulted with a bunch of teacher friends, both secondary and primary, to kind of confirm that, you know, the level was age appropriate, because I'm not really that familiar with primary sort of vocabulary and scientific level. So there was an element of that quality control. I wanted to make the product great because that's what will really sell it.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, you know, having done all of that work, the actual printing was very straightforward. I got a local printer in Durham to do it and did me a great deal on it. And so that came out really well. So then of course, the big problem that we always have when talking about selling writing is selling it. So how do I get this sort of unique, strange, new thing into the marketplace? So I had to build a whole website so people can order it and pay for it, but that had to then include explanations. And of course, one of the things that the teachers had asked for, which I think actually will help a lot in the sort of lockdown sales thing, is that they wanted activities. So each of the cards has a QR code on it, which will take you to a special associated web page, which has more information and pictures and stuff, plus an activity for the kids to do. And so building that website, it didn't take quite as long as writing the postcards, but it took me a lot longer than I'd anticipated. And so I finally launched on the 1st of December and had quite a good little run up to Christmas, because it's a really nice little thing that grannies and so on can buy for their grandkids. And I deliberately set it up so I would post the first one just in time for Christmas. And then you get one every week. So every week I have to take a batch of them to the postbox. But that's kind of where we're at. So, but that flurry sort of died off now that Christmas has finished. And I'm this week, in the next few weeks, trying to work out how do I get this into the public consciousness so that people if they're looking for something like that, know to go there to look at it and see if it's something they want to buy.
Did you say you'd done some Facebook advertising with it or not?
No. So far, I've only done sort of organic marketing. I haven't actually paid for any advertising yet. That's kind of the next step, if you like. I wanted to see how. Partly, I wanted to get the system in place so that I was ready to process orders and so on.
I would have thought it's definitely worth experimenting, putting some budget aside for Facebook ads, because especially at the moment we're going to lockdown again. There's people around here, I can tell you, with young primary school children who are tearing their hair out now because they've faced with several weeks ahead of us.
Well, and also they'll be stuck at home scrolling through Facebook all the time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there you go. So you know what to do after this interview. Get on there.
Fingers crossed.
And I can see it. So it's £19, which is $25, $26, and you get 12 weeks of weekly postcards. And how's the distribution done? Are you licking envelopes yourself at home, or is that done elsewhere?
At this stage, yeah. I mean, what I'm hoping, obviously, is that it just goes through the roof and becomes so crazy that there's too many stamps for me to actually deal with on my own, so that I can employ somebody to do it. But at the moment, I'm keeping it in house at the moment, if you like, so that I can make sure that the system functions properly and that it's working well enough, that it's easy to get somebody else to do the grunt work on it. However, one of the other aspects is that I already told you I'm writing Postcards from Deep Space, the follow-on series. So, of course, when they get the last one, I can then email them and say, look, I hope you like this. There's another series if you want to follow on. And here's a discount code if you want to take the next step. But then, that's Postcards from Deep Space. I'm also now spreading my tentacles a bit to other school teachers in different subjects, because, if you think about it, you could have postcards from anywhere, postcards from volcanoes, postcards from the jungle, postcards from oceans, postcards from ancient Egypt, postcards from the Tudors. I mean, it's just mind-boggling what kind of a mushrooming monster I could end up with here. And fingers crossed, you kind of develop a sort of loyal following who you want to
trademark Postcards from. Although Carrie Fisher may, because she wrote Postcards from the Edge, didn't she? But
in fact, actually, that was one problem I had. Is Postcards from was my initial plan, but both the .com and the .co.uk are taken. So I've got Postcards from Space, and I'm trying to work out what I'm going to do so I might have to alter the sort of thrust of that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really fabulous idea. I really love the idea of it. So I think the trick with all these things is going to be getting it in front of the right people. That is the trick, isn't it?
I mean, one of the things I'm hopeful is that it is kind of a unique idea. The way of it's being delivered is something that hasn't been done before. Now, the only competitor I've come across is that UNICEF have a system where you can get a postcard from Paddington Bear each month, and he takes you around different countries and shows you what kids are doing in different countries. But it's very much a different. I mean, it is a competitor. But because it's UNICEF, it's overpriced because you're paying a charity donation at the same time, and it's only one a month, and so hopefully, like I say, I'm looking to hopefully find a niche that is a different, special kind of thing.
Sounds great. Well, you've got a nice little freelance career, a very modern, very I would say probably pandemic immune business model going on at home with your textbooks and the Postcards books.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I found that I did more work during lockdown than I normally would.
Yeah,
which kind of annoyed me, but of course it meant I was very productive. I've published one novel in November, another one coming out in February, and the Postcards. Yeah. So it's been productive, certainly. And
I love the fact that I didn't realise that the European Space Agency allow their pictures to be used as well. I know NASA do, and I don't think people realise necessarily that fantastic NASA archive, one of the best photographic archives on the planet and off the planet, is available for use, and you can use it commercially. This is why you see adverts for cars and watches with moon, Apollo 11 photography in it, because anyone can use it. And I at some point will write a stroppy letter to the Imperial War Museum that have the back catalogue of official government photographs from the British military, including the RAF, and they don't allow anyone to use it, and they're very snotty about it. And I got a letter from them saying, well, I don't think a book cover is quite the right environment for these photographs. And I'm thinking, this is UK history.
Have you read what's the content? Surely it's absolutely appropriate.
I think they were put off by self-published. They're not dealing with Schuster and
Mickey
Schuster.
Mouse.
But it's for me, it's a part of British history, and it needs to be available, accessible, and out there. And I think that's exactly the right decision for NASA.
Well, I mean, they're very conscious that it's public money that's funding all of that.
Exactly.
And so they want to give it back. But the other, I guess one of the other reasons that people love space is because it's so freely accessible, because everybody's using it exactly as you suggest. That actually puts it in everybody's face, so that they're always seeing great pictures of space, and therefore NASA gets bigged up on the back of that, and therefore they've got more of an opportunity to bid for more funding. So I'm really kind of worried to a certain extent about the sort of privatization of the space missions, because I can't see Elon Musk giving his photos away for free.
No.
It's a different kind of kettle of fish entirely.
Well, if he's clever, he will, and he is clever, so maybe he will. But
well, fingers crossed. Yeah, maybe I might have to tweet him to campaign for it.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about the commercialization of the trips into space, the sort of Virgin Galactic, and Elon Musk, I think, has his own plans, and of course Jeff Bezos as well. That's an exciting aspect of, because I don't think NASA are ever going to be doing space tourism, but these guys will.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, there's certainly, I think there's room for both. Absolutely. And
when we have the Holiday Inn on the moon, I can see your postcards in the gift shop.
Okay, I'm going to make a note of that for future marketing opportunities.
Yeah. James Blatch said I could have a slot in this. Yeah. Okay, look, we're running towards the end of our time. Thank you. It's been really interesting talking to you. I'm very full of admiration for everything you've done to create these projects out of almost thin air. The last two, novels, I guess, are always created out of thin air, aren't they? But a unique idea with the postcards idea. I think a lot of people will be ticking over in their minds about the possibilities there. And my advice to you is to look seriously at, I think, social media advertising, paid ads. You can't really, organically is only going to get you so far these days, but cleverly written headlines, clear headlines that will attract the attention of granny and granddad, particularly, I think it would work well for you.
No, I'm certainly intending to do that. It's all kind of a slow burn to build up. Because, of course, the thing is, if I get 1,000 orders tomorrow, I can't fulfill them. So I need to. Nice problem to have, though. I suppose if I got 1,000 orders in one day, I probably have enough money to employ somebody to do it.
Yeah. You'll find everything is automatable at some point. Brilliant. Miles, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
There you go, Miles Hudson with his postcards from space, from the solar system. It's a really good idea, very nicely done. And I think there's still a place in this world, is there not, for receiving something physical through the post that you hold. I mean, perhaps when you and I were kids, we had to write our thank you letters, and we got letters occasionally. It was always quite exciting to get a letter. That's definitely tailed off a bit. My children hardly ever get a letter now, I guess. Birthdays.
No one writes letters, but I think that there is the whole kind of artisan movement with, you see it all the time, vinyl being a bigger medium now than it has been for years, and people kind of harking back to those, usually adults, but it's also fun. It's nice for kids to get those things as well. I mean, I know at Christmas time, my kids both get letters from Santa that come from, come from the North Pole, but probably not. And then they enjoy that, and I think there is a role for that kind of thing, and you're seeing that kind of personal or personalized physical artifact becoming quite popular and trendy again. Bearded hipsters like me get into that kind of thing. So it's a good idea and a good time to be doing it.
Well, I love my vinyl. I've had for a couple of years now. I've had my vinyl set up in here, and in fact, every now and again I dig out an album. So I got my AC/DC Back to Black, which is a classic album, of course. Back in Black, I should say. Back to Black. I think it was Amy Winehouse. Always get the two confused. But
easily done.
Easily confused.
Angus Young and Amy Winehouse, very similar.
Sounds really good. And I know it's probably is a hipster thing to say, but there is something about vinyl, and there is something about in the same way holding a postcard. And
there is. I'm getting as we develop the Operation Cowshed I've mentioned on the Facebook group, the new office, which hopefully, touch wood, will have bought that in the next, quite soon. One of the things I'm going to do is have the audiovisual guys install, kind of the speakers and everything, but I want to have a really good vinyl turntable in there. So I've got tons of vinyl I haven't played for years, so I quite look forward to getting that.
It is fun to do. So a couple of other things just to update you before we go this week. We have actually bitten the bullet and booked some flights, which is a very exciting moment in our lives. So yeah, we've bitten the bullet. We've bought flights for Florida. John and I will also do a couple of testimonial drop-bys on the way there, and that will be for NINC in September. Obviously, we're very hopeful about actually being able to travel, and we're very hopeful to be able to go on to 20 Books Vegas in November as well. So, God, I can't wait to be back out there. And
well, you have been jabbed because you are 62, aren't you? So you would have been right at the start of the line.
I check my phone every day. I have not yet received that jab, but it's coming.
My PA had hers yesterday.
Oh, did she? How old is she?
She's younger than me, but she has a kind of a few underlying, nothing serious, but she went to Salisbury Cathedral, which is over there as we record this, and she had it in the cathedral with the organ music playing.
Wow,
which is quite
experience.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd like to have it with AC/DC playing.
Or Amy Winehouse, even.
Oh, Amy Winehouse.
And her famous song, Back in Black.
Yes. Good. Well, we should all be jabbed. And in fact, I was reading today, in fact, John alerted me to this, that the administration, the states, are very confident of having the adult population done by the summer.
Yeah, they're going fast. And we're going fast. They're just, unless you're, German or French or Italian, it'll be sometime in 2024 you'll be jabbed, I should imagine. But let's not go there.
No, let's hope everyone catches up.
We can't go there because
we can't go there.
We're just not allowed.
Yeah, I'd like to help, but we can't go there. Good. I think that's it. Oh, the other thing to say is I did get my book off on time to the copy editors for the 1st of March, in fact, a day early. And I have a call with the editor tomorrow just to go over his first sort of look through and agree on some consistencies. So I'll get an initial feedback from him as well. So
and how many comments did you have in the Facebook group when you posted that?
Very many comments.
500?
I think it's been 500 interactions with the post, and 160 something odd people have wished me well. It's incredibly nice and humbling but you've all been along this journey with me. There's the J word. I mean, I have had this experience on my heart on my sleeve all the way through it, and I don't mind doing that. It's not been a problem. Occasionally you get the odd button pushed, but most people, vast majority, have just been nothing but supportive, and hopefully have learned something along with me along the way. But we've got the big bit to come, of course, publication, and we'll talk about book launch, hopefully with a new asset from you to help me along the way, if we can get that done, get that timing right.
Well, I've been recording a new course, a little mini course, which will be, again, very, very cheap, certainly less than $20. There's going to be a couple of other ways you can get that course, which I hopefully will have that finished in the next 6 or 7 days. So we'll have that ready, and young Tom has been editing away, so it'll be ready to go quite soon.
Good. Okay. Well, look, that is it from us, from the Self-Publishing Show for this week. I want to say a big thank you to Miles Hudson for being our guest this week. We have a good interview next week about another power couple in the indie space, whose surname, weirdly, is also Hudson. But I don't believe they're related. They are also British. But a really, really interesting interview at how their little business and their writing operation has taken off in 2020. Big business now. So we've got that coming up. Well done again to Clive. I should get your name right. Clive Weatherhead. Was it Clive Weatherhead? Clive Weatherhead, who won the Ads for Authors course. Don't forget your chance to win 101 and get other goodies at patreon.com/self-publishing show. That is it. All that remains for me to say is that it's a goodbye from him.
And a goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.